I've waited as long as I possibly can to make this, but enough is enough. Tottenham Hotspur are headed for relegation, and in this video, we're going to try and explain why. We'll be breaking down the tactics that went so badly wrong for Spurs against Fulham, why they caused so many more problems than they fixed, and why it could spell even worse things for Tottenham in the future. I want to start here because I think this illustrates really well some of Spurs' worst attributes and why Igor Tudor did what he did against Fulham. This is a graph that depicts expected goals against danger possession lost. Now that is a statistic that names and labels unsuccessful passes, lost dribbles or bad touches near a team's goal. Essentially, the higher the value indicates how bad the side is at press resistance. And as you can see, Spurs are out on an island by themselves right here with 27.5. Now, in comparison, that is higher than any other team in the Premier League, but they also have the fourth lowest expected goals. So something needed to change here, and something needed to change fast, which is why I think Igor Tudor went into the Fulham game the way he did. Igor Tudor went for that 4-4-2 formation. Yes, is it a departure away from his standard three at the back, but you're getting two main strikers up against and occupying those opposition centre-backs. You're also taking the possessional game away from Spurs' back four, namely a position and an isolated situation that would previously have caused them a number of problems. So getting it forwards isn't necessarily the main issue. One of the main problems that they had, though, was the way that they looked to build up play. Patterns of play were not available, and Xavi Simons was really isolated out on that left-hand side. Almost playing as a left mid instead of a left winger, he failed to really get into the game. And this is a really good illustration as to what I'm talking about. This is his heat map. If you take a look at the positions that he's taking up, while there is some occupation on that left-hand side next to the penalty area, aside from that, and aside from getting a couple of crosses in, he barely really got anywhere near those dangerous areas where you would want him, and that's a huge problem. And that meant that he went roaming. He had a bit more of a free roll, but then that left isolated space for Fulham to go and punish that Spurs left-hand side down Fulham's right. It was just crazy to allow that much space on to a player in Archie Gray who isn't natural as a left back either. It started to cause so many problems, and it really did hamper the way that Tottenham not only wanted to go forwards but also defend. And this is what it resulted in. 5 minutes into the game, you have your left mid and your right mid essentially 5 yards away from each other, and it goes over to Iwobi, who switches play. Look at how much space Tete is in on that right hand side. This is the Fulham right back. He's going to drive forward into that space and really punish the amount of space that Archie Gray has to defend. As he goes forwards, he's now looking for a cross. Look at how many Spurs players are over on that one side. Defensively, they're just not aware and they're not cohesive as a unit. The ball gets crossed into the box, and we do need to talk about this. It is a foul. If the foul from the game against Arsenal was a foul, and just generally two hands in the back of a player is a foul, then it should have been given. I feel a little bit sorry for Spurs about that, but it's not about this. It's far deeper than that. It's far deeper than decisions that get given against you, because this is so easily avoidable that it really just needs to be fixed. It really needs to be looked at. The second ball comes back in, and then you have Harry Wilson peeling off the back of Mickey van der Ven, who doesn't react quickly enough, and it ends up being a goal. It's unfortunate for Spurs, but the deep-rooted issues within this squad really came to the forefront here, and it's not only about the foul that wasn't given. This formation also had some huge negative knock-on effects from a defensive point of view, and that's because the defensive protocols that they had for this formation just did not work. So when Fulham ended up going forwards, because you had two main strikers who weren't given any major defensive instructions, they ended up just splitting into just rest areas, essentially passive positioning, not really applying themselves to the defensive part of the game. And they still, Spurs, wanted to have pressure onto those two Fulham centre midfielders, which meant that Basuma and Palhinha would look to push onto Berger and Iwobi as much as possible. Dragozin and Van der Ven looking to take occupation of Jimenez, and that meant that there was a load of space in the centre of the park once these players started moving forwards. Occasionally you would see this, essentially Basuma and Palhinha really being the driving force from a defensive point of view, but in them moving up and the backline not following, again, those defensive protocols not being initiated, not being activated, what you had was a huge huge amount of space for not only Emil Smith-Rowe, but also Wilson to then move into. It was this space that was being targeted and occupied by these Fulham players time after time again, and it caused so many different problems for this Spurs backline that they just weren't able to deal with it. Yet again, those defensive protocols not being activated and coming to the forefront. And this is exactly what happened for Fulham's second goal. It's a great hit by Iwobi, but the actual defensive protocols just are not in place for this Spurs side. And that is why I'm so concerned for them from a relegation point of view, because if you can't get your defensive protocols in place for a game against Fulham where you desperately need points, when are you? And a change of shape and a change of system, as well as some personnel changes, it just hasn't worked, and it's got to be fixed. It's so concerning for this Spurs side and Spurs fans alike. What happens here is you've got Iwobi on the ball currently, but notice the positions of the four forward Spurs players. You've got Kolomoani on that right hand side, you've got Dominic Solanke closest to you, and in the middle you've got Basuma and you've got Palhinha. Those are arguably your centre forward positions. It's crazy. Now, the ball might have been shifted around and players might swap positions, but the amount of space that's being left in between that forward midfield line and the defensive line is absolutely crazy. So when Iwobi wants to play the ball infield towards Harry Wilson, look at how much space he's got. It's insane. Honestly, it's maddening. The ball gets played into Harry Wilson, and then Iwobi has the amount of time to be able to run off the back of Solanke. Look at Solanke turn his back. You've got Archie Gray now activating to try and close down the space onto Harry Wilson, but it's all a little bit too late because none of these players are proactive enough. None of the players are willing to take a moment for themselves and try to predict what's happening. It's all reactionary, and that is a huge problem when you're looking to try and get yourselves out of a major relegation battle. To try and fix their defensive problems in that second half, what Tottenham did was operate a completely different pressing system. Instead of deciding to mark in a more zonal fashion, they went for a complete man-to-man marking system, pressing really high and being really aggressive, which meant that they looked something like this when Fulham were in their building phase. Now, initially, this did cause some problems for Fulham. They did a very good job, Tottenham, of making sure that they closed down the space, and what you had was isolated duels on that Fulham back line, using that front four of Spurs to really press forwards and stop those passing lanes. Dragusin being a main component of this to allow himself to go and pin onto Smith-Rowe depending on how deep he went. He followed him all the way, and it caused Fulham a couple of problems, and it meant that Spurs were able to win the ball higher up the pitch. But as is the norm right now with Spurs, for every good thing that they do, there is more often than not a more negative consequence, and that can be seen right here. Here they are implementing their man-mark pressing system. You've got them really high, almost on the halfway line, and they are man-marking this Fulham side. The ball is being kicked by Leno over the top. What I want you to do is just focus on a couple of players. Note where Dragusin is, following on to Iwobi, who's moved centrally. He's swapped with Emil Smith-Rowe, who's now on that far left-hand side. The right-hand side for Fulham, the left-hand side for Spurs. He's being marked by Palhinha. Note these two positions. The ball is going to go over the top towards Pedro Porro and Oscar Bob, the players closest to you here. So as this moves on, the ball goes over the top. Keep your eye onto Palhinha at the same time. Note how he's walking. Note how Dragusin has now left Iwobi. He's left Iwobi to come back to his position. Now as this goes on and as it continues, you've got Oscar Bob with the ball. Look at the amount of space that Iwobi's in. It is incredible. It's acres, and that's because one of the players has decided to disengage from that pressing system and return back to their normal position, but also the midfielders haven't taken up those spaces. Note also where Palhinha is on that top right hand side and where Emil Smith-Rowe is. This is all of the problems that Tottenham have and why it looks so certain that they're going towards relegation. It is incredible. As the ball goes into Iwobi, you now see him drive forwards. Emil Smith-Rowe has now peeled away from João Palhinha, who now is not actually interested in following the runner. Instead, he's going central, leaving that job to Matisse Tel, who was a little bit further away. Iwobi drives forwards. They take the space and then pass it over towards Emil Smith-Rowe, who is now not being marked by a single Tottenham player. And if it wasn't for a fantastic Vicario save, it would have been another goal for Fulham. It's incredible the way they were carved apart, using their own methods against them. But the way that these players react, as well as the unfortunate decisions from the manager, it just leads them towards one direction. And unfortunately, that direction's not a good one. It needs to be said that Fulham were absolutely superb in this game and fully deserved the victory. But from a Spurs perspective, the future and horizon looks ever more bleak. They have conceded over 4 XG in their last 2 games, and while the result against Arsenal was terrible, the performance against Fulham was even worse in my opinion. They struggled to create any kind of passing lane, any kind of passing route, and their passing accuracy was 74%. To put that into context, the lowest average passing accuracy in the Premier League this season is Burnley with 78%. Spurs can't keep the ball out of their own net, and no matter how Igor Tudor looks to change the side, it doesn't look like any of those statistics are changing anytime soon. Something needs to change, and fast, but what and how, I'm not too sure of. That is for you guys to let me know in the comment section below. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.